few months ago, my wife, who is 27, came to me with an idea that honestly caught me completely off guard. She told me that one of her friends had convinced her that starting an OnlyFans account would be a good thing for her. According to her, it wasn't just about the money. She said she wanted to work on her self-confidence, become more comfortable with herself, be more open to trying new things in the bedroom, and maybe make some extra cash on the side whilst doing it. As she explained it, she seemed genuinely excited about the idea. She even tried to reassure me before I had a chance to react. She told me she wouldn't be doing anything too explicit and that it could actually be a positive experience for her. One of the points she keeps bringing up was that her friend was already doing it and that her friend's boyfriend was completely supportive. The problem was that none of that mattered to me. The moment she brought it up, I knew how I felt about it. I told her immediately I didn't think that it was a good idea and that I wasn't uncomfortable with it at all. I explained that the thought of my wife creating content, flirting with strangers and sending pictures of herself online for money made me incredibly uncomfortable. I wasn't trying to control her or shut down the conversation. I simply wanted to be honest about how I felt. I told her that if she wanted to try new things in the bedroom or explore different aspects of our relationship, all she had to do was talk to me about it. There was no need for strangers on the internet to be involved. She didn't take my response very well. She was clearly upset that I wasn't supportive of the idea, and the conversation ended up on a pretty tense note. Still, after we talked, I honestly thought that was the end of it. We had discussed it, I had made my feelings crystal clear, and although we disagreed, I assumed she respected where I stood. Apparently I was wrong. So fast forward to today. I wasn't looking for anything suspicious. I wasn't snooping through her phone or trying to catch her doing something behind my back. What happened was completely accidental. While she was asleep, I stumbled across social media accounts that she had created for what was clearly an OnlyFans persona. Not just one account either. There were at least 2 different social media profiles dedicated to promoting it. My stomach dropped instantly. There were links to her page, there were photos already posted. Everything looked set up and ready to go. It wasn't some idea she was still considering. It wasn't a draft account she had just abandoned. She had actually done it. The worst part was realising that she had gone through the entire process after our conversation, after I had already explained how I felt, after I had already told her how uncomfortable it made me. As I sat there, looking at those accounts, I just felt sick. My heart was pounding, and I genuinely didn't know what to think. I kept staring at the screen, hoping there was some explanation that would suddenly make everything make sense, but there wasn't one. All I could think about was the fact that she had listened to my concerns, knew exactly where I stood and moved forward anyway. I started wondering how far things had already gone. Had she already been messaging people? Had she been flirting with strangers? Had she sent content to people behind my back? I had no idea, and that uncertainty was honestly one of the hardest parts. The more I thought about it, the worse I felt. My mind kept running through different scenarios, and every possibility seemed worse than the last. I felt betrayed, confused, and completely blindsided. What really hurt was that it wasn't just about the account itself. It was the fact that she knew how important this was to me and decided to proceed anyway. I couldn't stop thinking about this would mean for our relationship moving forward. If she suddenly started showing me more interest in trying new things in the bedroom, bought new lingerie or suggested roleplay ideas, how would I not wonder where those ideas came from? How would I not question whether she'd already done those things with strangers online before bringing them into our marriage? Those thoughts started eating away at me almost immediately. And then another thought hit me. If she was willing to do something like this after knowing exactly how I felt, what else would she be willing to do without telling me? That was the part that scared me the most. Not the account, not the photos, the loss of trust. I honestly didn't know how to approach the situation. She was asleep and I was sitting there, feeling like my entire view of our relationship had shifted in the span of a few minutes. I didn't know whether to wake her up immediately or wait until morning. I didn't know whether I was overreacting or underreacting. I just knew that I couldn't ignore what I had found. Not long after I had made my original post about the situation, she woke up and immediately noticed that something was wrong. I guess my reaction was written all over my face because there was no hiding how upset I was. At that point, I decided there was no point delaying the conversation. I confronted her. The discussion that followed wasn't easy. There was a lot of back and forth between us. She insisted that she misunderstood my boundaries and believed that my issue was specifically with nude content rather than the OnlyFans or Fansly as a whole. But that's not what I had said. I had been clear from the beginning that I wasn't comfortable with her creating an OnlyFans account at all. We went around in circles on that point for a while. Eventually, though, the conversation led somewhere productive. She agreed to delete everything. Every account connected to this whole situation was removed. I didn't just take her word for it either. I personally confirmed that the accounts were gone, and I even had to help her delete a couple of them because she wasn't sure how to fully remove them. So, as of now, the accounts no longer exist. That doesn't mean everything is fixed. The trust issue is still there. You don't just flip a switch and move on from something like this overnight. Even though the accounts are gone, the fact remains that she created them in the first place, after we had already discussed it. That's going to take time to work through. To be honest, she seems more upset about the entire situation than anything else right now. Whether that's because of the argument, the misunderstanding, or the consequences of what happened, I can't say for sure. What I do know is that neither of us wants to ignore what happened. Because of that, we've decided that couples counselling is probably the best next step. There are clearly bigger communication and trust issues here that need to be addressed, and trying to sweep them under the rug would only make things worse. I don't know exactly what the future looks like right now. What I do know is that finding those accounts was one of the worst feelings I've ever experienced in my marriage. For a while, I genuinely didn't know what I was looking at or what it meant for us. The accounts are gone now, but rebuilding trust is a much longer process. Hopefully, counselling will help us figure out where things went wrong, how we got here, and whether we can come out of this stronger than what we were before.
At first, it looked like a work trip to Cancun, the kind of thing you tell yourself is harmless, controlled, separate from real life. But then somewhere in between the excitement, the secrecy, and a decision that changed everything, it stopped feeling like a temporary escape and started feeling like a point of no return. And the moment reality finally caught up wasn't when we'd planned for it. It was on the flight home, when something happened that made everything we'd been building start to unravel in real time. 12 years into my marriage, I thought I had life figured out. Or at least, I thought I'd figured out how to keep two completely different lives from colliding. My boss and I had been having an affair that stayed inside very specific boundaries. Work trips, hotels, travel, distance, rules. We convinced ourselves that somehow made it different, safer, more controlled. But one decision changed everything. We booked a 4-day business trip to Cancun. Officially work, unofficially a celebration. Because we decided something big. And looking back now, that decision would end up changing everything. What started off as something occasional wasn't occasional anymore. No more only when we travel. No more pretending it lived in some separate world. we'd decided it wasn't staying compartmentalised. We were taking it fully into real life, and at the time we were excited, completely caught up in it, completely convinced we knew exactly what we were doing. The only thing I hadn't planned, how I was going to tell my husband, because I knew eventually I'd have to. But I kept pushing that conversation further into the future, thinking future me would deal with it. Present me wanted Cancun, and that turned out to be a mistake. The trip felt like stepping into another reality. No responsibilities, no routines, no consequences, or at least that's what we told ourselves. For 4 days, everything felt easy, simple, exciting, like real life had paused for a minute. But reality doesn't stay paused forever, and hours came crashing back somewhere over 30,000 feet in the air. On the flight home, that's where everything changed. Somewhere during that plane ride, I felt something, a sharp pain. One of those moments where your brain connects pieces before your emotions catch up. I froze. He noticed immediately. Are you okay? And suddenly, everything that felt exciting hours earlier felt terrifying. Because I realised something. Timing. We hadn't thought about timing. Not once. The excitement disappeared instantly. Now we were talking logistics, plans, options, what we should do, what made sense. And for the first time that entire trip, neither of us sounded excited anymore. Only nervous. Really nervous. But what happened after we landed somehow made everything even more complicated. We landed back home, cold weather, airport, parking garage. Real life waiting outside. No beaches, no vacation, no pretending anymore. We just sat in the car longer than we needed to. Talking. Actually talking. Not like people caught up in excitement. Like people suddenly realising that choices have consequences. One question became another, then another, until eventually we hit the question neither of us wanted to ask. What do we actually want? Not vacation life, not fantasy, real life. And suddenly, the answers weren't nearly as simple anymore. Because for the first time, I realised part of me already knew. And somehow that realisation scared me more than anything. I got home late, really late. My husband was there, waiting. And suddenly, the conversation I'd avoided planning became unavoidable. No more pushing it off, no more later. It was now. I told him about the affair, about what had changed, about how this wasn't staying occasional anymore. I expected anger, a fight, yelling, something, anything. What happened instead caught me completely off guard, because he wasn't shocked, not really. He admitted he suspected something for a while, and somehow hearing that hit harder than anger would have, because suddenly I realised something. I wasn't hiding things nearly as well as I thought. Or maybe people who know us best notice changes long before we realise we've changed ourselves. I kept talking, trying to explain, trying to justify decisions that honestly didn't even fully make sense anymore. And hearing myself say everything out loud changed something. Because sometimes reality sounds different when you finally hear it spoken. The future I thought I wanted suddenly felt unfamiliar, complicated, messier than I expected. Because excitement makes things feel simple and consequences don't. And sitting there that night, I realised something uncomfortable. I spent so much time managing two lives that somewhere along the way I stopped really looking at either one. And that realisation stayed with me long after the trip ended, long after the conversations ended, because sometimes the hardest thing isn't getting caught, it's finally seeing yourself clearly. Looking back now, what shocks me isn't the affair, it isn't the lies, it isn't even realising how much could have changed, It's how easy it is to convince yourself you're in control, until suddenly you're not. One decision becomes 10, 10 becomes 100, and before you know it, you're standing inside a life that barely feels recognisable, thinking you've had everything figured out, realising maybe you never did, because consequences don't always arrive loudly. Sometimes they arrive quietly, on a plane ride home, 30,000 feet in the air, when there's nowhere left to run and nowhere left to hide. Like what you heard? Hit subscribe and like the video for more stories every Thursday and Sunday between 1800 and 2000 BST. And remember, curiosity opens doors better left closed.